Thanks for staying with us here on The Real Story. We're about halfway through the state legislative session. As bills pass out of committees and lawmakers work on drafting the state's next budget, some legislators are heading out across the state to hear directly from residents. Joining me now is State Senate Minority Leader Stephen Harding. Stephen, thank you so much for being here.
As always, thank you so much.
So I want to start with, time's gone by really quickly, but you've been the Senate Minority Leader for a little more than a year now, I think about February of last year. So you've gone through a session and a half at this point, second session as the Senate Minority Leader. How's this past year been for you in that role?
It's been eye-opening, and it's really been a great opportunity. I've really gotten to know the members of my caucus in a new way. We had an election cycle in between, which brought challenges. It also brought some positivity. We had some races where, particularly in Lower Fairfield County, where many people had written off the Senate Republicans there, which we had resounding victories by Senator Fazio and Senator Wong. We've been able to really advocate for the issues that we believe are important to us, and I think been very vocal about it and very productive despite our lower numbers. And so it has been a very exciting year. I think generally a very positive year, and I'm looking forward to the future year ahead.
Great. So tell me a little bit about when you began this statewide tour and where you've sort of traveled to thus far.
So it's just in the beginning stages. We've been to Ansonia, and we've heard from business owners. Really, that focus in Ansonia was more business owners and talking about the red tape involved with the state of Connecticut and how we are so bureaucratic with the regulatory climate we have on small businesses here in Connecticut, almost more than many other states throughout the country. And hearing from those small businesses how difficult it is to grow your business here in Connecticut in the regulatory environment that really cripples them, both financially and the administrative aspects of that. So that was a really key component of that. And then we're also kicking off the tour in New Canaan shortly. We're going to be going to many other towns in eastern Connecticut as well. I know that Senator Gordon has been doing his town halls and focusing on affordability. He's actually been to all 13 communities in his district. And what he's hearing from voters is obviously the obvious, which is the electric rates, which has been a huge aspect of the conversation when it comes down to affordability here in Connecticut. Getting that public benefit charge off the electric bills. It should not be on your electric bills. It should be within the confines of the state budget. It is what skyrocketed this past summer and has also impacted homes throughout the rest of the fall and into the winter. And we're trying to do something about addressing that in the Senate Republican caucus. We've made some headway in being vocal about it, but we have to do more.
And I do want to get more into those energy costs in a second, but you mentioned some of the other senators. Is this the whole Senate Republican caucus that's kind of taking on this tour in their own areas?
Correct. So there's going to be, Senator Martin's going to be heavily involved with this, Senator Fazio, and also every other senator within their districts are going to be hosting tours. That is the plan, because we want to reach all areas of the state, and even in areas where we don't have Senate Republicans. It's important to hear from everybody throughout the entire state of Connecticut, because unfortunately unaffordability is a huge aspect of everywhere in our state. We are one of the highest in terms of income taxes, third highest in electric rates. We have some of the most burdensome regulatory climate on small businesses in the entire country. So everywhere across the state, small business owners and residents are being crippled with unaffordability, and we have an obligation in the Senate Republican caucus to do something about it.
I want to start with the small business owners, which you mentioned you've already spoken with. You talked about some of those regulatory barriers, but was there any other sort of resounding thing you heard from most small business owners kind of across the board?
Taxes, income taxes, the pass-through entity taxes, the fees. So in addition to taxes, obviously there's all these fees that many of the departments, and you could look at it as regulation as well, but it's financial. And so a lot of the departments in the state of Connecticut require fees with basic things. And so that's some of the things that small businesses have talked about as well. We've also talked about the delivery charge tax that is being proposed by Democrats in Hartford as well. It would tack on 28 cents to every single delivery. So not only would that impact small businesses that receive deliveries, it would impact small businesses that send out deliveries. It would also impact, obviously, consumers that have many things delivered to their homes. And what is really unfortunate about that tax, and the reason why Senate Republicans are fighting so hard against it, is that it's completely regressive, and a lot of young families use deliveries. You have kids at home, you don't have time to run out to the store, so what do? You go on Amazon or you go on online to the grocery store and you order something to get sent in, 28 cents doesn't seem like a lot in one transaction, but it compiles after a while, and every cent counts. And we see Democrats finding unique ways, unfortunately, to tax the general public, and that's something that we're going to continue to stand against.
You mentioned the taxes. You mentioned some of those smaller fees. 2 sessions ago, the previous budget, we did see a big, some big tax cuts across the board. We've seen, some pushes from majority to eliminate maybe licensing fees that might not apply to small businesses, but in other sectors. Do you think that those are steps in the right direction that could be built off of, to get toward cutting costs for small business owners?
We're always going to work to try to reduce fees across the board and taxes across the board. So if there's ways that we can reduce fees and those onerous fees, 100%, we're more than happy to do that. And we've been doing that. The one thing I will note, though, it's important, we did have tax decreases in previous budgets that were bipartisan for the most part. With that said, the Republicans, particularly Senate Republicans, proposed almost double in terms of tax decreases to what the majority ultimately passed. So yes, did we make some steps in terms of reducing tax? Yes, but could we do far, far more in this state? 1,000,000%, and we should be doing more to provide the tax relief in an already overburdened tax state to begin with.
So when we go to energy costs, I feel like that and fiscal guardrails has just been the two resounding issues of the past 3 sessions, at least, that I've been here, that I've covered. This energy cost has really been an ongoing issue, and I think it truly is, multifaceted. There's a lot of things here. You mentioned the public benefits charge. That's been one of those big sticking points. I know there was a public hearing in the Energy and Technology Committee recently. Tell me a little bit more about some of the Senate Republican caucus issues with this public benefits charge.
Yeah, so it's the most regressive tax in the world, because somebody living on the coast in Greenwich that's a billionaire is paying the same exact rate as a hardworking middle-class family in Bridgeport, for example, paying for essentially state social programs. That's what the public benefit is. It has got nothing to do with your generation. It's got nothing to do with your supply. It's got nothing to do with the delivery. It is purely state programs that they're using. The state is, the Democrats in the legislature are using Eversource and UI essentially as tax collectors. So these are programs that should be phased out. That's what Senate Republicans have proposed. Placed in the confines of the state budget, within the confines of the guardrails, as you mentioned, as opposed to being baked into a public benefit charge. And Democrats are so much in favor of this hidden tax that some Democrats have even proposed hiding the public benefit charge and no longer showing it as a separate part of your bill. The reason for the outrage is finally we've been able to expose this public benefit charge, which many consumers weren't even seeing in their bill on a monthly basis, and that's why there was such an outrage, as there should have been. And we have a real opportunity here to finally to phase this out, where it should be put it in the confines of the state budget, because many social programs are baked into this, and take it off the electric bill and provide immediate relief to the consumers of the state, which they desperately, desperately need right now in electric bills.
Right. I know that's been a focus, is, doing things this session, short-term or immediate relief.
Right.
When it comes to, long-term plans, is there anything your caucus is proposing or getting behind? I know a lot of the disagreement has been, short-term versus long-term. Something Democrats have pushed for is investment in alternative energy sources, whether that be, wind or what have you, solar, to try and lower costs in the future, but that obviously wouldn't see a return on investment for a long time. What are some of those long-term plans to lower costs you're looking at?
So as you mentioned, the public benefit charge phasing that is a short-term plan that we all support. But the long-term plans is looking at ways to increase our supply, and Emma, making affordability a huge aspect of that. I think primarily what we've seen from Democrats is they've really pushed the Green New Deal, and that we've purchased very unaffordable energy and put that on the backs of the consumers. What we're saying in the Republican caucus is we could still strive for renewable energy. That's a positive thing, but do it in an affordable manner. And the example of that is Senator Fazio has been the champion of this, is capping the PPT agreements, which is these purchase agreements where they can't be more than 1.5 times the market rate that you're forcing the consumers to pay for. So go out there, find green renewable energy energy resources. We support that, but don't force the consumer to pay more than 2 times. And what we're seeing in solar and wind, in some cases, making them pay 3 or 4 times what the market rate is for regular energy. That's why they're seeing such a skyrocket in their bills. There's a way we can cap that. It's more of a long-term effort, but you can still find some pretty quick relief with capping these agreements.
So looking ahead now to June, obviously the legislature is working on their version of the next 2-year state budget. We saw the governor's, presentation in February. That aside, how are you feeling for the rest of the session? We're seeing bills get passed out of committee now. As we're halfway through, is there anything, you want residents to know or to watch over these next few months toward June?
Yeah, well, I think the fiscal guardrails is a huge aspect of that. And the reason for that is fiscal guardrails is saying protections from tax increases, because the only reason we haven't seen tax increases, and we've actually seen some tax decrease budgets in the recent years, is because the guardrails have been in place. I was in the legislature as a state rep prior to the fiscal guardrails. Right. And what happened is previous legislatures just continued spending and spending and spending and spending. And what ended up happening is we ran into deficits when the economy went down. Right. And what ended up happening is 2 back-to-back unprecedented, record-breaking tax increases. So when you hear Democrats, either in the House or the Senate, say that we want to modify or change or get rid of the guardrails, they're saying they want record tax increases, because that is the consequence of that. And so that's why Senate Republicans are so steadfast on maintaining those guardrails. It is supposed to keep spending in check so we don't have deficits and we don't force huge tax increases on an already overburdened tax state to begin with.
In our last minute here, how do you balance keeping those guardrails in place, which we know in the past 2 sessions, Governor Lamont has stood by. He was a little bit less clear this year. We know the fiscal guardrails were approved for another 5 years last session. In the past, it's been bipartisan support for them. But how do you sort of balance not tweaking those guardrails with groups like, nonprofits, with some of the healthcare workers who are saying they're not getting, even higher education aren't getting enough money from the state?
Well, I think the guardrails are written in a manner to address, inflationary costs, to address other increased spending. In fact, the guardrails have been written in such a manner where we can expend hundreds of millions, if not almost $1 billion in increased spending and still stay within the confines of the guardrails. That's a lot of money. So I would argue that the guardrails are written in such a manner, and it's the reason why, frankly, they were passed unanimously by both parties just a year ago in the chamber, is because they're forward-thinking. They do allow for increased spending in times of need to invest in the groups that you mentioned. So Republicans, I think, look at this as a matter of we can keep those guardrails, confine our spending so we don't place unburdensome tax increases on the public, but at the same exact time, make some increased investments in areas that need it. We can do both. We should do both. Democrats, by saying they want to get rid of the guardrails, basically are saying they want to spend fiscally irresponsibly.
Well, Senator Harding, thank you so much for checking in with us. Definitely a lot of work for you all in both chambers to get through before June, but I'm sure we'll be checking in then. But thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
That does it for us here on The Real Story. But if you want to watch these segments again, you can head to fox61.com or download the free Fox 61 News app and watch The Real Story every Sunday right here at 10 a.m. or streaming on Fox 61 Plus. Have a great morning.